Sometimes the greatest shift in your life happens when you finally decide to stop chasing someone who keeps disturbing your peace. Acting like he's gone isn't about being cold or dramatic. It's about choosing your emotional sanity over someone's inconsistency. When you remove his influence from your heart, you create space for clarity, confidence, and the version of you that finally puts peace first. Acting like he's gone begins with understanding that emotional detachment isn't cruelty, it's survival. When someone repeatedly shows you that they can't meet your emotional needs, that they won't show up with consistency, effort, or respect, you reach a point where holding on becomes more painful than letting go. The first step is accepting that your peace will never fit inside a situation that constantly shakes your confidence. Acting like he's gone means you stop feeding energy into a connection that only drains you. You stop rehearsing the past, stop analyzing his mixed messages, and stop waiting for someone who has already shown you that they don't prioritize you. This isn't giving up. This is reclaiming your mental clarity. You begin by pulling your attention back into yourself. So much of your emotional turbulence came from centering your life around what he thinks, what he feels, what he wants. You may not realize how deeply you adjusted your tone, your plans, your boundaries just to avoid conflict or avoid being abandoned. But when you decide to act like he's gone, you reverse that pattern. You start choosing you again. You let yourself reconnect with who you were before his inconsistency began to define your emotional landscape. Your peace becomes the main character of your day, not his behavior. Acting like he's gone also means removing him from the everyday loops of your mind. You stop checking his online activity, stop replaying old messages, stop imagining conversations that never happened. You don't need to delete your memories, but you must starve the thoughts that keep you stuck. Every time he crosses your mind, you gently redirect your focus. Not because pretending he never existed will magically heal you, but because refusing to feed what hurts you is the most loving thing you can do for yourself. Healing requires discipline, and peace requires intention. You also begin restructuring your habits. Instead of waking up wondering if he will text, you wake up choosing something that elevates your mood. Instead of scrolling through places where his presence still lingers, you give your attention to people and activities that don't play with your emotions. Acting like he's gone means setting an emotional boundary that says, "You may have access to my past, but you no longer get to influence my present." That boundary is what allows you to breathe again, and most importantly, you stop negotiating with someone's absence. When a person wants to stay, their effort will be clear. You won't have to decode it, chase it, or prove that you're worthy of it. Acting like he's gone pushes you to stop writing a story in which you are the only one trying. You stop romanticizing potential. You stop hoping for a version of him that has never shown up. You stop giving emotional intimacy to someone who only offers you confusion. In that moment, your peace becomes more valuable than your attachment. This shift isn't easy. It won't feel natural at first. You will have days where you miss the idea of him, not the reality of how he made you feel. But each time you choose your peace over your longing, you strengthen a muscle inside you, the muscle of self-respect. Acting like he's gone teaches you that your heart doesn't break when someone leaves. It breaks when you keep holding on to someone who doesn't honor it. When you finally let go, you don't lose anything. You simply return to yourself, and that return is where your real story continues. Giving yourself permission to detach is one of the most powerful acts of emotional freedom you will ever experience. So many people stay stuck in painful situations, not because they're weak, but because they don't feel allowed to let go. They feel guilty for stepping back, for protecting their peace, for choosing themselves. They keep trying to justify why they should stay connected to someone who repeatedly drains their energy. But the moment you give yourself true permission to detach, everything changes. You start realizing that your emotional well-being doesn't need his approval, his closure, or his participation. You don't need a perfect ending to walk away. You need honesty with yourself. Permission to detach starts with accepting the truth of the situation, not the fantasy. You stop telling yourself stories about what he might become and start acknowledging what he has continuously shown you. Detachment doesn't require anger, rebellion, or dramatic cut-offs. It only requires clarity. Once you stop fighting reality, the grip loosens. You begin to see that holding on isn't loyalty, it's self-abandonment when you're the only one trying. And that's the moment your heart quietly whispers, "You don't have to carry this anymore." Listening to that whisper is the beginning of healing. When you consciously choose detachment, you create emotional space where peace can breathe again. You stop reacting to his distance, his silence, his half-hearted effort. Instead of wondering what you did wrong, you start asking a deeper question. Why am I accepting less than I deserve? That question shifts your focus inward, where the real transformation happens. Permission to detach is not about forgetting him. It's about remembering yourself. It's about recognizing that your peace matters more than his inconsistency. Your growth matters more than his excuses. Your future matters more than your attachment to what hurts. This permission also shows up in the boundaries you set. You stop replying instantly. You stop making yourself emotionally available to someone who only reaches out when it benefits them. You stop letting nostalgia override the reality of how you felt at your lowest because of this connection. Detachment empowers you to choose intentional distance without apologizing for it. You're not being cold, you're being clear. You're choosing mental freedom over emotional chaos. You're choosing to stop participating in a dynamic that leaves you feeling small. As you detach, something remarkable happens. Your self-worth recalibrates. You start realizing you weren't asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. You see how much love, patience, presence, and empathy you were giving, and how little of it was reciprocated. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who wasn't enough, you finally understand that not everyone is capable of receiving the purity of what you offer. Detachment helps you release the burden of trying to fix someone who isn't ready to grow. It reminds you that relationships are partnerships, not rescue missions. And the more you detach, the more you begin reconnecting with parts of yourself that were neglected. You start rediscovering your joy, your creativity, your aspirations. You make decisions based on what you want, not what keeps you emotionally tied to him. Detachment becomes a doorway back to your independence, the kind that feels strong, not lonely. You begin to trust yourself again, and that trust becomes your new emotional home. Detaching isn't a rejection of love, it's an act of self-respect. It's choosing to no longer exhaust your heart, trying to keep someone who doesn't know how to value it. It's choosing peace over potential, clarity over confusion, and self-worth over emotional dependency. When you finally give yourself that permission, you don't lose him, you lose the version of yourself that kept settling. And that loss is the beginning of your freedom. One of the most liberating realizations you will ever have is that distance doesn't just create space between you and him. It creates space for your peace to return. When you're emotionally wrapped up in someone who drains you, disappoints you, or keeps you in a cycle of uncertainty, your mind becomes crowded. Even when you're physically apart, he still takes up mental real estate. Thoughts about him linger, questions replay in your head, and emotions get tangled. But when you intentionally create emotional distance, not as a punishment, but as a boundary, everything inside you begins to shift. You start breathing differently, thinking differently, seeing yourself differently. Emotional distance is not about coldness, it's about clarity. It's the moment you decide that you cannot keep letting someone have access to your heart while offering so little in return. It's the moment you stop defending his behavior in your mind, stop making excuses for the inconsistencies, stop searching for meaning in mixed signals. You begin to understand that someone who genuinely values you won't make you guess how they feel or force you to chase after their attention. Creating distance isn't about pushing him away, it's about pulling yourself back into alignment with your worth. At first, distance might feel uncomfortable. Your mind may reach for him out of habit, not love. You might feel the urge to check up on him, to see if he noticed your absence, to see if he suddenly realized what he lost. But over time, you start noticing something more important. Peace begins to seep back into the places where chaos once lived. You no longer wake up with anxiety about whether he'll message you. You stop overanalyzing every interaction. You stop feeling responsible for managing his emotions while yours go neglected. Distance gives your nervous system a chance to calm down, which is something it could never do while you were emotionally entangled with someone who kept you off balance. The beauty of emotional distance is that it pulls you out of reaction mode. Suddenly, his silence doesn't shatter you. His inconsistency doesn't destabilize you. His ego-driven behavior doesn't dictate your mood. You start choosing how you feel rather than letting him influence it. That kind of emotional sovereignty is transformative. You become less invested in what he's doing and more invested in how you're healing. Distance creates room for new thoughts, thoughts about your goals, your happiness, your future, thoughts that aren't centered around someone who wasn't showing up for you. And something surprising happens when you detach emotionally. You begin to see the relationship without the fog of attachment. You start noticing red flags that you brushed aside before. You recognize patterns you tolerated because you were hopeful. You look back and realize how often you overextended yourself while he gave the bare minimum. Distance removes the emotional bias that made you hold on, and in its place, you gain perspective. That perspective becomes your power, the power to choose differently, to prioritize yourself, to stop settling. You also start reconnecting with your identity independent of him. You rediscover hobbies, passions, friendships, routines, and dreams that were overshadowed by the emotional roller coaster he kept you on. You remember what life feels like when you're not constantly waiting for someone to show up better. You feel your confidence rebuilding, slowly but surely. Emotional distance gives your heart the chance to regenerate, to regain strength, to relearn what healthy love feels like by first giving that love to yourself. Distance doesn't just create space, it creates transformation. It turns emotional dependency into independence. It shifts your focus from what you lost to what you're gaining. It reminds you that peace isn't something he gives you, it's something you create by choosing yourself. And in that space, you finally understand why acting like he's gone isn't weakness. It's reclaiming your peace, your power, and your life. One of the greatest shifts you will ever make in your healing journey is learning to disconnect from the outcomes you once hoped for with him and instead reconnect with the life that still belongs to you. When you stop waiting for him to change, apologize, finally choose you, or suddenly become the version of himself he always promised he could be, you take your power back. Because as long as you're holding on to the outcome, you're holding yourself emotionally hostage. You're tying your peace to something you cannot control: his behavior, his maturity, his timing, his effort. And when you finally let go of that attachment, you create the mental and emotional freedom that rebuilding truly requires. Rebuilding your life doesn't start with moving on instantly or pretending you're fine. It starts with giving yourself permission to stop living in emotional limbo. So many people stay stuck because part of them is still waiting for closure, waiting for answers, waiting for him to realize what he lost. But every day you wait for him to come back or change is a day you lose with yourself. The reality is, closure rarely arrives in the perfect packaging you imagined. Sometimes closure is a quiet decision you make alone to stop letting someone's absence dictate your self-worth. Once you detach from the hope that he will become your happy ending, you discover a deeper truth. You are not missing your future, you are rediscovering it. Rebuilding your life means reclaiming the parts of yourself you put on pause for him. Maybe you paused your dreams, your peace, your confidence, your hobbies, or even your identity. When you were consumed by him, his moods, his messages, his inconsistencies, your world got smaller without you realizing it. Now the rebuild is about expanding it again. It's about remembering the girl you were before him, the woman you're becoming after him, and the version of yourself that doesn't need his validation to shine. This doesn't happen overnight. It happens through small decisions, choosing routines that nourish you, setting boundaries that protect you, and nurturing relationships that pour into you rather than drain you. As you rebuild, you begin to realize how much emotional weight you were carrying inside the relationship. The emotional effort you poured into him, wondering, worrying, hoping, fixing, becomes energy you can finally invest in yourself. And when you start investing in yourself, your life begins to move forward in ways you didn't expect. Your confidence returns, your energy shifts. You walk differently, speak differently, even think differently. You're no longer operating from fear of loss, but from alignment with your worth. And here's the part that often surprises people. When you rebuild without resentment, without bitterness, without needing revenge, you heal faster. Because you're not rebuilding your life around proving something to him. You're rebuilding your life around becoming someone you're proud of. That kind of transformation doesn't seek attention, it radiates it. It's not about showing him what he lost, it's about rediscovering everything he never gave you. Peace, stability, joy, fulfillment, self-respect. The most powerful rebuilding happens not when you replace him with someone new, but when you replace the version of yourself who settled, waited, or hoped for bare minimum love. You become stronger, softer, clearer, more grounded. You look back and realize you didn't just survive losing him, you found yourself in the process. That is the real win, not getting him back, not making him regret it, but rising so fully in your own life that you no longer measure your worth through someone who couldn't value it. Rebuilding is not about erasing him, it's about elevating you. And when you commit to that process, your story keeps going stronger, brighter, and without the weight that once held you down. There comes a moment in your healing where you realize that peace isn't something you stumble into. It's something you choose by no longer giving him mental access to your life. The moment you stop explaining yourself, stop convincing him of your worth, stop replaying every detail in your mind, and stop hoping he'll suddenly see what he couldn't appreciate before, your entire energy shifts. Peace begins the second you decide you're done trying to make someone understand your value. Because the truth is, someone who genuinely sees you never needs persuasion. Someone who truly cares about your heart doesn't need reminders, warnings, or second chances to treat it right. When you stop giving him space in your mind and heart, clarity returns like a quiet whisper you forgot you could hear. You start noticing how heavy things actually felt when you were trying to make the relationship work. You realize how exhausting it was to always be the one trying, waiting, hoping, checking your phone, analyzing his tone, rationalizing his behavior, or wondering what you did wrong. Peace is what fills the space where overthinking once lived. Peace is what grows when you stop responding to chaos like it deserves your attention. Peace is what rises when you let silence replace conversations that only drained you. Part of gaining peace is accepting that some people were never meant to stay, no matter how much you cared. That's one of the hardest truths to swallow, but also the one that ultimately frees the most. You can waste years trying to understand why someone couldn't love you the way you loved them, or you can reclaim those years by understanding that their emotional limitations were never evidence of your inadequacy. When you stop trying to decode his behavior, you start decoding your own patterns. You begin to see the difference between love and attachment, consistency and crumbs, real partnership and emotional guesswork. And once you see that difference clearly, you don't want your old life back. You want better. When you stop giving him access, you also stop giving him the power to influence your mood. That's when you begin to notice how much calmer your days feel, how much more focused you become, how much lighter your heart is. It's incredible how one person's inconsistency can create so much internal chaos, and how their absence can create so much internal order. That's the peace you earn by walking away. Not peace that depends on someone else behaving correctly, but peace that comes from finally behaving correctly toward yourself. And here's something beautiful. The moment you reclaim your peace, your standards rise without effort. You naturally stop entertaining people who make you feel unsure. You stop aligning with anyone who drains you. You stop making excuses for red flags. Peace makes you pick yourself first, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. And when peace becomes your priority, your choices start reflecting a version of you that knows her worth at a level he could never reach. That's why letting go is not weak. It's not running away. It's not giving up. It's choosing yourself with a strength you didn't even know you had. It's choosing the right battles and realizing he isn't one of them. Peace returns the moment you stop fighting for what was never secure. Peace grows each time you choose silence over reaction, distance over drama, self-respect over emotional chaos. And the more you protect that peace, the more you realize it was never him you needed. It was the version of yourself who finally stopped abandoning her own well-being for someone else's comfort. Walking away from someone you cared about will never feel easy, but the moment you understand that leaving isn't a sign of weakness, it becomes one of the most powerful choices you can make. Leaving isn't about proving a point. It's about understanding that your emotional well-being is not a gamble you can keep placing on someone who repeatedly shows you they cannot be trusted with it. There's a strength in choosing yourself that most people don't recognize until they've finally stepped away from what was quietly breaking them. Acting like he's gone isn't pretending. It's accepting reality without resisting it. And accepting reality is the first step toward emotional freedom. So many people stay in situations long past their expiration date because they think holding on proves love, loyalty, or resilience. But sometimes the strongest thing you can do is recognize when something is no longer aligned with your value. It takes courage to walk away from someone you once imagined a future with. It takes wisdom to release someone who became familiar, even if they were not good for your heart. And it takes deep self-respect to admit that love should not cost you your peace, your identity, or your emotional safety. Walking away doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough about yourself to stop shrinking for someone who wasn't growing with you. When you choose to let go, you reclaim the power you once handed over. You stop waiting for him to choose you, fix things, show up better, or finally match your effort. You stop tying your happiness to his decisions, and that's how you win your peace back. It's not something he can give you, because it's not something he has ever held. Your peace returns when you stop placing it in someone else's hands. It's something you rebuild through boundaries, distance, clarity, and a newfound understanding of what you truly deserve. Walking away also shifts the energy dynamic in ways that often reveal truths you couldn't see before. When you were available, he may have taken you for granted. When you kept giving chances, he learned there were no consequences. When you explained yourself repeatedly, he learned he didn't have to change. But when you walk away, not to manipulate him, not to get a reaction, but for your own emotional survival, you show him something he never expected, that you value yourself more than you value the illusion of potential. That's when he begins to feel the loss, not because you wanted him to, but because he never imagined you would choose yourself so powerfully. But here's the part that matters most. Whether he regrets it or not is irrelevant. Whether he comes back or not is irrelevant. Whether he realizes your worth or not is irrelevant. The victory is not in being missed. The victory is in no longer needing to be. When you walk away, you start building a life that is no longer centered around someone else's inconsistency. You create routines that protect your heart. You nurture friendships that uplift your spirit. You rediscover passions that make you feel alive. You begin to feel like yourself again, the version of you that doesn't operate from lack, insecurity, or fear. You start choosing from abundance, not desperation. Walking away doesn't close your heart, it frees it. It frees you from the emotional confusion you once normalized. It frees you from craving the bare minimum. It frees you from trying to turn someone into the partner you hoped they could be. And with that freedom comes